Hello, and welcome to Technically Speaking, where scientists and engineers come together to chat about a common interest, share knowledge, and satisfy some curiosity. I'm Antonia, and I'm joined by Ellie and Laura to talk about things that come from animals, why some of them are so expensive, and what are we doing with them. So Ellie, this is something you've reported on in your job as a science communicator. What was it that you were talking about?
Well, it's quite interesting, really. So, ages ago, my colleague Rachel wrote an article about scorpion venom and whether it was the most expensive animal-produced product in the world. And I think it was last episode or episode before, we got sidetracked, as we usually do, talking about horseshoe crab blood and how that's really expensive. So I thought it deserved its own episode so we can delve deeper into quite what is going on with all these things.
Yes, I definitely remember the blue crab blood that we just had to discuss more.
Yeah, we couldn't let that one slide.
So Laura, what piqued your interest about these things?
Well, again, it was that episode where Ellie mentioned the most expensive animal product for research purposes, I think. And I said it's not an area that I work in, but I am really intrigued. So there's loads more science that I know very little about, and I would like to know more and know what the environmental impact is if we're using what is essentially, you could say, is a natural resource, but something that was probably here before we were.
That's a good point. Yes, is it there for us to take? So, should we start with what could be the most expensive thing from an animal, the horseshoe crab blood?
So, as you said before, it's icy blue. It's not red. We were all led to believe, necessarily. And it's icy blue because it's got these very fancy things in called ambiocyte, and instead of white blood cells to fight infection, they have the ambiocytes. They are really useful to pharmacological companies and in the sort of production of vaccines because they're really good at detecting bacterial toxins, and then they trigger, when they find something that shouldn't be there, they make these clots around the bacteria. And so when you take it out of a horseshoe crab, you can then use it in testing your vaccine. And if there's anything that's in the vaccine that shouldn't be in there, these clots will form. And then I think that's how that they go in then and can extract them and make it super, super sterile and super clean, I guess, for use in humans. It's a pretty wild process. And if you Google it, there's absolutely mad pictures online of rows and rows of horseshoe crabs being propped up with little straws coming out of them, essentially, and filing all this icy blue liquid into vials. Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. And I think there was a few stats banded around about how much it actually costs, but I think it's worth something like $15,000 a litre, US dollars.
Wow. So you can make quite a decent living just from collecting a few crabs and selling them to research pharmaceutical companies.
Well, I think you probably need quite a lot of infrastructure to make that happen. I don't think you're going to be extracting the blood yourself, I'd say. I don't know. What I don't understand is whether they're farming them themselves or if they're going out into the world and scooping them out of Earth's oceans. I don't quite know where they're getting them from. But it did say that apparently they only take 30% of their blood and then they put them back in the ocean.
I'd read up to 50%, and some of them they do it by stabbing them in the heart.
Oh!
Oof. Yeah, it makes me think, would you survive that? But then crabs are different to people.
I feel very few things are going to survive being stabbed in the heart.
I suppose we have pain receptors that might tell us, oh, that's too much. And it is said that, do fish feel pain? So would the crabs feel the pain? Or are they just a bit woozy because they've only got 70% or 50% of their blood? Or is it enough to kill them?
In this article that I was reading, it said that 10 to 30% of the crabs don't survive the blood harvesting process. And then it's also been suggested that the females that do survive and get returned to the wild breed less because presumably they're not feeling so hot, and then that might hamper their recovery. So yeah, it's probably not great to be a crab that's had its blood taken out, realistically, but I think they don't necessarily all die.
We're going back to the thought about whether they're farmed or how do we retrieve them. This NPR article Laura found about the process suggested fisher people.
Fishers, just fishers, I think.
I call them fisher folk.
Fisher folk. Fisher folk makes them sound like mermaids.
True.
People in the fishing industry
There we go.
would pick them up and then take them to the companies that harvest them. I mean, pharmaceutical supply companies, I suppose. And then sometimes they'd get them back, sometimes they just get...
Yeah, and it sounded like it's one of those things. There isn't a set of regulation that these creatures fall neatly into. They're not really captured by fisheries regulation or general, animals for research legislation, that sort of thing. So, when I was a researcher, you had to use an ethics statement if you were applying for research. And I always said, well, there are no ethics to consider because I'm not working on animals or people. But presumably, if you're actively researching something on the animals, you need to do it in a responsible way, but not so much if you're just harvesting a part of the animal and putting it back.
Which is a very grey area because obviously you are having some impact on them because, like Ellie said, 10 to 30% don't survive afterwards. Don't think you could just say, oh yeah, it was fine. We sent them back to the ocean.
I find it really crazy that there isn't legislation that simply says all natural biological resources should be managed so that populations are sustained. Because to me, if that is a resource you want to keep using, you want to make sure you can continue to use it. So to me it seems really obvious, but this is in the United States, isn't it? So they seem less inclined to focus on environmental concerns sometimes, I think.
Yeah, apparently there was concern that they were over-harvesting them, which is not a surprise when it comes to the fishing industry and the pharmaceuticals. But I don't know, it's still a weird one because surely there must be a standard of do they have to have a certain size? Do they have to grow to a certain age or weight or volume? And also, if you're releasing them back, how do you know you're not picking up the one that you just put back in the ocean 2 weeks ago? Has it regenerated enough blood to still be useful?
Yeah.
So I think it's quite an interesting one.
Something else that I find incredibly silly about this whole thing is that there's a synthetic version that was made, I don't know, maybe about 10 years ago possibly, thinking of how research works. So it's a recombinant molecule, which essentially means they take DNA from the creature and then they use that in a bacterium, say, to then produce these amoebocytes, I assume. That was accepted by the European Union in 2017 as a suitable alternative to extracting blood, but other places seem much less inclined to take it up.
I wonder how it varies on expense, because if you've got the infrastructure to allow you to harvest the blood from these crabs and you've got it all set up, switching then to a completely different method probably is not going to do your profit margins any good. However, if it's very expensive to do the whole let's capture the crabs and take their blood, maybe switching to synthetic in the longer term is a better idea.
Yeah, you would think lots of things are produced from recombinant DNA, so it should be relatively straightforward. And that NPR article that Antonia mentioned did say that, I think it was a company in the European Union said it actually turned out to be cost effective and led to an improved quality of the drug products they were making.
Oh, so if it's better, then let's go for that. And the poor crabs can be left alone.
Yeah.
I suppose do people see natural resource as just simply sitting there not making money, and they could be making money off it.
Well, that's true. How many people in the fishing industry would lose out because they couldn't farm crabs to keep the pharmaceutical industry employed? What's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Supplied.
There is also the aspect that maybe why Europe was more interested is because these horseshoe crabs that were being collected or harvested were from the Atlantic coast.
Yeah, if they came from the United States, they had further to go.
Yes.
Oh, so maybe they were paying to ship them across or something. So there was more sort of vested interest in making their own supply.
Well, that's already quite depressing, Ellie.
Yeah, I've started off on a strong one, haven't I? But, to be fair, if you've ever had a vaccine, you could well have horseshoe crabs to thank for your now immunity and your clean vaccine. So really we owe the crabs, I should say. And maybe we should push harder for synthetic products instead of crab blood in the future.
And also, I imagine if it's a synthetic product, we actually have more control over what the amniocytes look like and what the rest of the content in that product looks like, versus just collecting a bunch of a natural product, the crab blood, and then having to refine it to exactly what we want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would also wonder if some of the labs that are making the drugs could all just synthesize the amoebocytes themselves using the recombinant DNA. Because a lot of vaccines are made using recombinant DNA. See where I'm going with this? And they do a lot of purification of the vaccines and whatever anyway, to filter out any of the unreacted product, maybe, depending on how the vaccine's made. So if I were a drug manufacturer, that's what I'd be doing.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. I think it's probably a better long-term solution, because potentially, like all of these things, are we just going to wipe out the crabs eventually? And then we're going to be really stuffed if we've got no alternative.
Yeah, because there are migratory birds that rely on eating their eggs as they migrate up and down the US and possibly other places, or the Americas. So if you're disrupting bird species, what knock-on effect does that have if they're affecting populations across the globe because of how they migrate?
Yeah. I mean, as we all know, the ecosystem is very connected, so you start messing with one part of it, there's always knock-on effects to something else. And if we, wipe out the birds, what are the birds, contributing? Often, a lot of bird droppings end up in the ocean, which feeds other species. It's all linked. It's a big web, so I say, leave the crabs alone. Let's move on. Technology's got significantly further than when they started this, so I'm sure we can process a synthetic alternative much better.
I had another thought, and I just wondered, if crabs aren't like the bottom of the food chain, they eat other aquatic life, are they also accumulating heavy metals like other species do?
Oh, quite possibly. I couldn't tell you yes or no for sure, but probably microplastics as well, because that seems to be in everything nowadays.
So what if this isn't a sustainable alternative because we're already polluting oceans as well? Yeah, because the ambiocytes, were they specifically for bacterial toxins?
I guess heavy metals don't count in the same way, because it's like what do you call it? Because you always have I don't know about the anatomy or physiology of a horseshoe crab, but you always have trace amounts of metal in the system anyway, don't you? So maybe it's not too bad.
And the toxins are proteins, right? And they're quite large molecules, which will probably have metals in them, depending on what they're made of.
I should also say that we have been calling them horseshoe crabs, and they are called horseshoe crabs, but they are not in fact crabs. Oh. Another fun zoology quirk. They're not even members of the crustacean family. They are actually related to spiders, and they're called oh god, the bloody Latin with these things. Chelicerata, which includes arachnids and scorpions. So, there you go. They're not even crabs in the first place.
And that's probably what made it even more of a non-protected area, because they're not even a fish or vertebra. They're an invertebra.
They're in their own thing of arthropods.
Going back to what you were saying about, you probably got horseshoe crabs to thank for being able to receive vaccines that are free from various toxins. We've actually got spiders to thank. How many people do you think can accept the vaccine if you said, spiders help make that?
Oh, but very few, I expect. But I do think it's funny that this is like stuff that's been going on for so long, like under the radar. Like obviously people knew, but like the average person, and even me with like zoology science background, I didn't know this until recently. It's so weird.
We've been using horseshoe crab blood for 30 years?
Yeah, something like that.
It's a long time. And I think on the topic of other vertebrate, not vertebrate, what was that Latin phrase that you used earlier? I'm going to make you say it again.
I'm going to get better at this. Chelaterata. I'm going to write it down. I'm sorry, everyone. It starts with a CH, that's all you need to know.
And there's another one that we were going to discuss, because it's also quite expensive.
Yes, so like I said, the horseshoe crabs belong in this order, but they are closely related to arachnids and scorpions. So we're moving on now to scorpion venom. So we've had horseshoe crab blood, and this is scorpion venom. And apparently a few hundred micrograms will fetch you about $200. So probably not quite as expensive as the horseshoe crab blood, but still not to be sniffed at if you're looking to make your millions.
Oh, weren't there rumours on the internet that you could get like millions of dollars potentially for the scorpion venom, which I just thought, even if you knew nothing about it, just seems crazy and not true. But people apparently believe it.
I mean, people do believe a lot of crazy stuff that they read on the internet. I think it's like the horseshoe crabs, isn't it? Like, if you find a few, realistically, you're not going to make millions of dollars. And if you start breeding scorpions to milk them for their venom, I don't think that that's really going to be the cure for your bank account. However, it is worth a lot because of its use. We're going back to the pharma industry. Scorpion venom is particularly rich in proteins and peptides, and that boosts the capacity to block or rearrange ion channels in the body, which is getting a little bit more biology than I know about. But apparently they're promising candidates for venom-derived drugs, so we could be making scorpion venom pills, I guess.
If you manage to rearrange an ion channel, what happens?
I couldn't tell you, to be completely honest, but I do know that they are looking at scorpion venom in pharmaceuticals for things like epilepsy and treatment of autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis. So the actual how it works, I can't tell you, but apparently those are the applications for it.
So I think some of the drug applications directly relate to interrupting ion channels. I found a really helpful overview article in the Biomedicines journal from a few years ago. It's even got a very helpful diagram of all the different applications that different parts of the venom could have. So yeah, you mentioned immuno responses, anti-cancer, antifungal, antibacterial, antiviral, many different things. And for some,
all of the good antis.
Yeah, for some of them it sounds like you can block particular ion channels that are involved in sending pain signals, so you could offer pain relief.
You wouldn't think that from scorpion venom, would you?
They can also block ion channels in T cells, and these are part of the immune system. So it can suppress their function by preventing activation of certain genes, I think. So that's one way that they act as a immunosuppressive, which would help, I would assume, for autoimmune diseases.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it feels like autoimmune diseases, I want to say, are becoming more common, or seem to be more apparent, like more allergies, more undescribed, unlike specified things, sort of like irritable bowel syndrome. It's a syndrome because we don't really know what caused it. Some people say it might be linked to an autoimmune response. So, it sounds weird, but is scorpion venom going to be treating all the syndromes we don't really understand?
I mean, I don't know. Potentially. I guess so. I always see lupus. Lupus seems to be everywhere at the moment, especially in relation to celebrities. So I couldn't say for sure that they're using scorpion venom to treat lupus, but that's what it said, that the treatment of autoimmune diseases was one of the possible applications. So who knows?
Yeah, this journal article said that there was only one venom component that had made it through to clinical trials, so it wasn't being used to treat anyone at the time of writing, which was 5 years ago. And I think clinical trials take quite a long time, so I suspect things haven't moved on a massive amount. So I don't think it's being used to treat anyone yet. There's an awful lot of research, which is what makes the venom valuable, because there's an awful lot of research to go at from the sound of it, because it can treat so many different things, potentially.
I guess then comes the question, say someone has a pet scorpion, how are they going to harvest that for the drug testing industry?
Well, this is a thing, because I, again, was concerned about how they were getting the venom out of scorpions. And apparently, one of the people that we spoke to at work was interviewed for our online magazine, and he said that he goes to Europe to milk the scorpions of people that keep them as pets. So it's very, I guess, ethical, much more ethical than the crabs.
I would assume these people keep their scorpions in the same way that I keep my rats and my dog. They're very well looked after.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And he's also, he seems like a lovely person, because he said, I share it with other researchers for free. So he's not charging for the venom that he's collecting, if people want to do scientific research on it, which I feel like is a good thing, absolutely.
Yeah, and this is the thing, a small amount of venom can go an awful long way in research, so you don't need much of it to get a lot of use out of it, from what it sounds like. Yeah,
I think it's tiny, tiny amounts. There was also a thing that said that they were working towards making a synthetic alternative and sequencing the DNA to find out how to make it artificially as well. So it could be the future.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
But it sounds like if they're people's pets, presumably they're not being harmed, otherwise people would be not volunteering their beloved scorpion for this.
Yeah, exactly. I think also it's like having like a trustworthy source of the venom. Like if you want it for scientific research, you have to sort of fact check where it's coming from, I guess. So it's not like, if it's from a sick scorpion, it's probably not any good.
Yeah, do some medical checks on the scorpion and ask about its diet and its bowel movements. What it's been up to recently before you do the milking, which I think, from what I'd read, a quick Google search suggested they can either use electricity to stimulate the stinger, or they can just squeeze it after holding the scorpion quite firmly. Initially.
Yeah, I'm imagining it a bit like snakes when they, like put the fangs through like a film on a jam jar. But I've actually never seen it done for a scorpion, so I couldn't tell you for sure. Though there is some suggestion that the amateur venom extraction business is having negative impacts on wild scorpion populations. But maybe that's more for people that are like trying to farm scorpions sort of in an amateur way and then sell it to Big Pharma, rather than just having a few that you keep as your lovely pets.
Well, what a problem for those, almost like poaching really, because they're not going to be looking after the scorpion after they've milked it. They're just kind of going, it's not my problem, it's just out in the wild, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's some suggestion that they're like, there's this sort of interest in scorpion venom has then put pressure on wild populations, because people think, I can make bare dollar from this, and then they're going out and sort of catching scorpions that they shouldn't be doing.
But would it be a dangerous job? Because getting stung isn't great. So will they get a taste of their own medicine for daring to do this?
I think actually scorpions get a lot of bad press. There are some very dangerous scorpions, but I think a lot of them are. It would hurt, but you wouldn't die. You would be fine if you got stung. Though maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe I should put everyone off and say that they're all really deadly and you absolutely should not go foraging around looking for scorpions.
I know. I feel like they maybe know that through experience if they're used to scorpions being in their environment anyway. I'd also read that you can just wear PPE, like they can't really sting through leather or vinyl, so just, wear jeans, leather trousers and some really tough gloves.
Wear gloves and you might make millions from scorpion venom.
But maybe not, because, as I say, a little bit of venom goes a long, long way in research, so it really is not worth it. You still need to find someone to sell it to and prove that it's a pure source and all that sort of jazz. It just doesn't seem worth it to me.
No, I don't think it is. I don't think there'll be many people out there really looking to buy it.
However, I am very impressed at something that is essentially toxic, and it seems to have many different actions or many different components to the venom. Once you separate all that out, can actually be really useful for medicine. I think that's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we can get it from people that are happy to volunteer their pets and are looking after their scorpions well and not damaging wild populations, then perhaps it's not so bad. I feel like it's better than the crabs anyway.
Yes, and as Antonia says, when it gets to the point that there's a drug to develop, doing it in a synthetic way rather than constantly milking scorpions, I think is the best move.
Yes, absolutely.
So we've talked a bit about liquids for science and particularly pharmaceuticals. What other expensive animal-derived products are there? Well,
this one is an interesting one because you probably have heard of the pangolins being the most trafficked mammal in the world, and there's a good reason for this because they are apparently worth around $3,500 per kilo of pangolin scales, and it gets even interestinger, if that's not a word, but you know what I mean, even more interesting. Because these scales are then made into powders and used for a variety of ailments, including cancer, none of which seem to have any true scientific backing. So this is what we would call traditional medicine, shall we say.
Which I can see the value in if the patient is considered to be being treated so that their whole body, so I'm being treated so I'm getting better, and they somehow overcome a illness.
Are you saying they've taken it and they seem to also be getting better?
Yeah, kind of like the placebo effect, yeah. Well, if you can sort of convince your body that it's being treated so it kind of gets better on its own. I have no idea how...
Like the power of hope.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of studies have this placebo effect, don't they? They give someone a placebo, they give someone the actual drug, and they see if there's a difference.
This is quite an expensive placebo, though.
Well, yes.
Yeah, really expensive. It's interesting as well because they are also eaten, but I think the scales fetch a much higher price than the meat. And they're never... Fresh scales are not what people are after. They always want them to be dried or roasted. And apparently they can be cooked in a variety of things, including oil, butter, vinegar, and the urine of boys to cure all sorts of ills.
I'm not sure what's worse. Medicine made from spiders. Medicine made involving human urine.
So where are people getting the pangolins from? Are they being trafficked from their natural habitat, which is... I don't remember where they're from.
Yeah, so there are 8 species of pangolin, and 4 of them live in Asia and 4 of them live in Africa. And this is like a real problem. So this is full trafficking. This is not done legally. I think now it's illegal for all 8 species. They are protected by international law. There are trade bans on the import and export of this sort of thing. However, there is still a black market for this, and it is enormously profitable. And apparently, according to the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, a pangolin is taken from the wild every 4 minutes for this sort of black market in, what do you want to call it, products, animal products.
Which, unless they're very prolific and quick to breed and don't have any other predators that are helping keep their population under control, is probably not a good thing.
Apparently, between August 2000 and July 2019, 895,000 pangolins were trafficked.
Oh my
though
God.
That is likely an underestimation of how many were shipped across the world.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a heck of a lot.
And that's also quite the market based on no scientific evidence.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's this sort of idea, I guess, of culture almost, of, things that persist. It doesn't necessarily need to be backed up by science to make it wealthy. It's demand and supply, isn't it?
That's like a lot of human activity, isn't it? There's no scientific basis for doing this. We're going to do it because we've always done it. That's how we do things here. You've got to wonder, though, whether there are scientists that are concerned about this, that are actively trying to demonstrate that there are better medicines out there, or just that this is not a great practice because of the impact it has on the natural world.
Yeah, well, apparently, according to one of the museums in Liverpool, the practice of using pangolin scales for medical cures has been happening since at least 480 CE. So you can see that this is super ingrained in the culture of those countries, and changing that is very difficult. Also, I think from a Western perspective, we see a lot of animals as we should protect that, or we have, the most pets out of any country. We have a very sort of caring nature towards animals, whereas a lot of other countries don't have that attitude in the first place, and will see an animal much more as a resource that they can get meat or medicine or whatever from. So I think changing those cultural attitudes is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I guess you've got to find a way of trying to make other behaviours more desirable. Like, if you make it really, really easy to get medicine in some other way that's proven to work, and you can show to people that it works, maybe that helps.
Yeah, I would like to believe that it does. I guess maybe also now people are using them alongside. It's not one or the other. It could be both. Why, if you feel unwell, take an ibuprofen, but then also have some pangolin scales. You might as well, cover both bases if you've got it to hand.
Just in case. Yeah, hedge your bets. Yeah.
But you think making it an illegal product would put people off and go, maybe there's a reason why we have decided this is not a good thing to do?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I think it's a bit like ivory, because ivory was made illegal, but the demand for it is still so high. So it's where is it coming from? Why does this persist when now, perhaps necessarily you didn't always know that it was killing the elephants, or that the pangolins are suffering because of this? Maybe you could be forgiven for not knowing that, but I think as technology's evolved, as the internet's evolved, you can find out where stuff is coming from. So, yeah, I think people have less of an excuse now why they still use these products.
I'm also thinking, how much are these cultures that use traditional medicine sort of blocked from science? Because my grandma kind of uses traditional medicine. She believes in the hot and cold theory of Chinese medicine, but she still uses modern medicine as well. So it's only for mild ailments that she would say, oh, I'm going to make a soup of some weird vegetable stuff that's supposed to balance out the hot and cold, but I'll also take the medicine from my hospital.
I think that just demonstrates how ingrained some of these things can be. It's like, when you get a cold and people say, oh, take chicken soup, or lots of lemon juice, or drink plenty of fluids.
Or just have lots of vitamin C.
Yeah, there isn't any scientific basis to say that any of those things are likely to work. Yet we still do them. It's comforting.
Yeah, it's comforting. I think that's definitely about the chicken soup. Like, back when I ate meat, I feel like if you had a cold, I'd be straight down Co-op getting Heinz chicken soup and a crusty bread roll. Like, it makes you feel better, regardless of if it's actually curing your illness.
But in the case of vitamin C, I read you have to have a higher level of vitamin C all the time, rather than just taking it when you're ill.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing, that it's more preventative, rather than, oh, I'm ill now, I'll do it. It's too late then.
I wonder if it's like there was a grain of truth that somewhere in the Pangolin scale there was something valuable, but they couldn't figure it out because they didn't have the technology to identify it was a particular molecule or chemical. And so they just take the whole scale, eat it, and that was what worked.
Yeah, there's a lot of Western medicine that still does that. It's like they observe the effect of a particular treatment, and they don't really know why. They don't know the biochemistry. They just know that it works. They do. Like, no one really knows how anesthesiology works.
That feels worrying.
And yet, yeah, general anesthetic happens all the time.
Oh, I did not know that we didn't know how it worked.
I will caveat that I've not looked into this. This is what I've been told. So there are probably different versions of that truth as well.
Obviously, trafficking pangolins for no scientific benefit is terrible, but there must be other conservation challenges we've met because of valuable animals, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've not really touched on just eating animals. So recently, there was a absolutely ginormous bluefin tuna, and it sold for $1.3 million at Tokyo Fish Market.
Wow, it's a lot of money for a dead fish.
It's a lot of money for a dead fish, and it is massive. Like, I think people underestimate how big tuna are, because this is 608 pounds, or 276 kilograms of fish. So at least you're getting, I guess, bang for your buck. Yeah, what's about 300 kilograms?
Several people's worth. A small motorbike. I'm trying to think what's equivalent to what you just said.
A bear? A small bear?
Is an elephant?
I don't know, it's probably more, probably over.
Baby elephant must be more than that.
I had to put this into perspective because I was like, how much fish are we getting for that £1 million? Like, that's the conversion rate from $1.3. So normally you pay about £10 per kilo of tinned tuna. If you're buying a tuna...
Oh, like Sainsbury's?
Yep. If you're buying a steak, so the pink, bright red, pink stuff, £18.75 for a kilo.
That seems quite a lot.
Yeah. But I suppose you only buy like 200 grams, 500 grams.
Yeah, you buy like what? Yeah, enough for 2 people.
And this one that was sold at the market was £3,600 per kilo. As much as the pangolin scale, or more than pangolin scales.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? That something like one fish could set you back so much money is just absolutely mind-blowing to me.
Is this one of those things, like, if you're in the club, you recognise the value of something, you're prepared to pay more for something. You know how people pay stupid amounts of money for handbags and things like that?
Is it the, like, experience to say that you're eating bluefin tuna is, like, equivalent to being like, I just spent £5,000 on a Chanel handbag?
Yeah, so there's this prestige of owning, why you'd want to own it, I don't know. But owning this ginormous, presumably quite powerful, difficult to catch creature that's been killed.
I think they were selling it to make food, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're selling it for the meat, which apparently is a rich and buttery taste.
Yeah. What's the markup on that going to be, though, to make it profitable? Given what Antonia just said.
Yeah, how much are you forking out in a restaurant for a bluefin tuna steak?
let's say you pay, I don't know, even like £10 for a piece of nigiri, some sushi. How much more amazing would this bluefin tuna have to be for you to have it, to pay that amount of money? Would your taste buds even be able to sense that difference?
I'm going to say that mine could not.
Mine definitely couldn't. I've tried this with many different things, really fancy wines, whatever else. I can't tell the difference.
I think if you like it, it's fine.
Exactly.
But something like this, I'm not paying, $3,000 per kilo just to eat this elusive tuna. But you were talking about conservation challenges, and apparently overfishing has decimated the Pacific bluefin tuna population, reducing it by 97.4%. So that probably adds to the price that it is, in fact, especially hard to come across.
I feel like this is leading to another episode about fishing and how detrimental it is to the environment.
Oh, you accused me of being depressing at the beginning. If we get into fishing, everyone's going to be weeping by the end. The estate we're doing to our ocean.
No one really uses fish as the poster child for conservation.
It's because people don't care about fish. This is my bugbear. People care about pandas, cute and fluffy things. Okay, pangolins, they're pretty adorable when, they're alive. But fish, very few people can get on board with thinking that a fish is cute, and therefore it's not getting the attention it deserves. And also, people like eating fish. It's popular. Everyone likes fish and chips at the seaside.
True, it is more of a treat for me, though. And I live by the sea. I don't eat fish that often. I still care about the fish. I think there needs to be more films about fish. There have been quite a few anyway, haven't there? Finding Nemo and cartoons about sharks. Not Jaws, obviously not.
I was thinking Shark Tale.
Yeah, Shark Tale. The one where they work at the fish car wash. I enjoy that one.
At the car wash. Yeah, and Angelina Jolie was there,
Yeah.
And who else was in there?
Was Will Smith in it?
I think he was.
I remember it being a very weird film. That's about it.
Is that Shark Tale? I might have to watch that again. I think that's a great film.
It was a great comfort film.
Yeah, there need to be more fishy films out there to make you aware of how cute and how vital fish are.
Yeah.
To life on Earth. We used to be fish, I guess. Going back to our episode about the pre-Cambrian explosion, Ellie.
Oh, we used to be blobs in the ocean in the good old days.
Do you think that cute films make us care more about overfishing or the environment?
I think popular culture is hugely influential. Think of what's the one about the killer whales kept in captivity? Blackfish?
Free Willy? Is that too old? Do you think of a newer one?
This is a documentary rather than a cute kids film. But yeah, that put enormous pressure on Disney World and Orlando parks and all of that sort of thing to release those whales. So yeah, maybe there is some fish documentary / film to inspire us all to care about overfishing. I hope so. There's definitely David Attenborough episodes about the oceans that have they're behind the scenes and they tackle some of those issues.
I think that's a good place to leave it. We've talked about fish in films, and we started off with horseshoe crab that isn't a crab blood. So I think what we've learned is that there are different things we can get from animals, and they can be very useful in medicine or developing medicine. And there are also some which are not at all useful for medicine, and we just eat them anyway, and that has environmental problem or conservation problem. So hopefully we can keep developing some synthetics to replace that, and the communication about the issues we cause on the planet. I mean, yeah, it's a constant struggle, isn't it, to communicate that. But hopefully we'll find another topic and we won't talk about environmental sustainability again, but we probably will, because everything has.
We definitely will.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course we will. Something we all care about.
It is. But for now, we'll draw this conversation to a close. Thanks for listening.
The views expressed in this podcast belong entirely to the person that said them. They do not represent any industry or organisation. If you enjoyed listening to these views, it would really help us out if you could rate us, leave a review and tell a friend. This podcast was sponsored by no one, but if you're interested in funding us to continue to have frank discussions about science and engineering, please get in touch.